is the Creations by Chris. Welcome back to part 2 of how to make shoes at home. This is another pair of shoes I made at home. Ta-da! Okay, now in part 1 I shared with you the tools you'll need, the materials, and I cut out the soles and made the uppers for the shoes. Now just a point about the tools, all the tools are hand tools and the stitching is done on a standard sewing machine. Now let's continue with part 2. Now for me, the tricky part to this entire process is once you've sewn it to this point, I flip the fabric up over the toe and I stretch it over and hold it with my finger, and then I flip it back over to make sure it's nice and smooth. And at this point, because it's still wet, you can still kind of move it around a little bit. Then I hold it with my finger and I'll take my needle and I'll go straight up to the edge and I'll pull it down. Oops, sorry. And then I'll go cross stitch again to hold it all in place. And as I said before, your stitching doesn't have to be perfect because all this is going to be taken out later on. But at this point, we want this to lay nice and smooth across the upper part of your plaster mold, because once it dries overnight, or you can even put it in the oven and put it on low heat. But you gotta be careful because you don't want it to burn in the oven either. So what I prefer to do is just to let it set overnight. And an added thing that I do is once I've gotten everything sewed and then placed it where I want it, kind of double stitch it at this point again to make sure everything's nice and tight. Snug. I'll cut the thread at this point. Now eye it again just to make sure everything is nice and flat and just right. I'll turn it back over and I like spraying the edges just a little bit more. So everything is nice and damp, not too wet, and it looks like it's molding onto the plastic or the plaster mold pretty well. I like to take a piece of fabric, any old piece of remnant fabric you have left over. This just happened to be black and white. And what I like to do is just take it and place it over the mold this way and just roll it. Let me get a better grip. Just to roll it over the mold. All it does is just to make sure that it's on the mold nice and tight. Then I just take a little stick pin, a straight pin, and just put it there just to hold it in place. That gives you some idea. That's one thing you can do. You really don't have to do that, but the reason why I do it because I want to have it nice and tight and firm on my mold. When we come back, we'll show you how you cover the heel of the shoe, how you make the sole for the shoe, and how you use the shoemaker's glue to glue on the heel. And I like to also, as a little added precaution, use a screw also in the heel. Okay, so what we've done so far, here's one of the heels that we've already covered. And the way how I made a pattern for covering the shoe, I just took a paper towel and I just laid it over the heel. And I just trimmed around the paper towel, basically like this here. And this allowed me to make a pattern for it. Okay, and this one has been partially placed on the heel of the shoe. I've already partially glued it, and what I'm going to continue to do is glue the inner layer here and around the edges, and then just hold it in place. And this will be the results. If you need to trim it a little bit at this time, you can trim. So we place the glue on the inner part of the heel and around the edges, and we're just pressing it in place. And the type of glue I'm using here is the Elmer's rubber cement glue. And one thing about this glue, you want to remember that when you're using it, you want to make sure you have a fan going on in the room and crack a window also, because it can be a bit on the strong side. And we have got that all in place. Now remember, these are the last that we did, where we put the upper part of the shoe while it was still wet, the fabric and the buckram, and we wrapped it onto the last. Now they're nice and dry. Let them dry overnight. And we're going to flip them over, and the stitching that we did, you're just going to take out scissors and we're just going to cut it. And we're going to pull them off of the last. And this is what you're going to have. And this is the top part of the shoe. And then the strings and all that, you can just cut those out. Now this is going to be the right shoe, and this is the left. Now what you want to do is you want to mark one of these as to which one's the left and which one's the right, so you'll know which is which. And what I did, I just put a black mark here on the back of this one, so I know this is the left, so automatically this will be the right. And this is going to be the upper part of the shoes that we're going to be using. So here, what we've done so far, earlier I showed you the cardboard pieces that we were cutting out, and these are the parts that's going to be the sole of the shoe. This is going to be the insert on the inner part of the shoe, and then we're going to have a leather piece that's going to be the outer part of the shoe. But what I've done here is that I've taken the cardboard and I've cut out the piece of fabric, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover this cardboard. I'm going to edge up glue all around it, and then I'm going to cover it, and this is how it's going to be placed inside the shoe, like so. The glue has been placed all along the edges, and now we folded the edges around onto the cardboard, and this is what it looks like. Now remember, you can't use a glue gun with this. You need a special glue, and this is what I use. It's the rubber cement. It's the rubber cement glue, and it's flexible, and it makes a nice tight bond. And at this point, what we're going to be doing is taking this insole, and we're going to be placing it inside of the shoe, like so. And we're going to glue on the inside of the shoe, and we'll be gluing on this side of the shoe as well. And another thing, so that it can be more comfortable, what we'll be placing is a piece of felt. We'll glue that inside the shoe as well. And remember, we still have the sole, which is the leather sole, that's going to be placed on here. But once all this is glued in place and let it set and dry for a couple of minutes, then we'll continue. We've glued the inner soles inside of the shoe, and this is the back of the shoe here. We put this little piece of felt fabric here too, it's going to serve two purposes. It's going to give you some cushion on the bottom because we still have to place the leather sole on it. And it also is going to adhere better to the leather sole that we'll be placing on it. And we've done this on both sets of the shoes, or each one of the shoes. Now, one of the things I like to do for a little bit added security or stabilization of the shoe is that I'll place staples around on the edge, because this is one of the stress areas or the stress points that when you're walking, to make sure that everything stays in place even though it's been glued. And what I use is a staple gun. Basically, it's a Stanley staple gun with the short staplers, and I place it on a block of wood when I'm stapling everything in place. So that way it leaves an impression on the wood and not on my cutting table. So that's just an added tip, and it's something that I like to do. So our next step is we're going to be adding the shank on the bottom, and we're going to be adding the heel. Okay, so what we've done here so far, the shoe already had a hole drilled in it from the old pair of shoes that I'm reusing the heels. And so we're taking this portion, which is the metal portion, which gives you the arch support in your shoe, and this is called a shank. And what we're going to do is place the shank here. There's a hole here in the shank already, and there's a hole that's drilled here in the shoe already. And we're going to put the glue in, and then we're going to place it on top. And what we did, we measured off exactly where this screw is going to fall inside of the hole that's in the heel already. And we're going to glue all this together and place it on top like so. And the reason why these two pieces are here, because these shoes are going to have a ribbon tie up around the ankle. And so this is a piece of ribbon that has already a loop placed in it already. But we're going to glue all this together. Now we have everything glued in place. We glued on the heel. And remember the metal piece here? This is called the shank. And it already had a hole on one end, the upper part, as well as on the back. And that's what we use to screw in the screw. And this is called the Pop-Rivet. We use the extra hole there to put in the Pop-Rivet, and there's a special device that we use for this. And what it does is gives it extra support. And because this metal piece of the shank here, that what gives you your arch support in all your shoes. And remember, I said before, I took the shoe heel and the shank from an old pair of shoes that I no longer was wearing. And you can always recycle your old shoes and make new shoes from this as well. Now the next thing we'll be doing is that we'll be taking the leather that we purchased, and we've already cut out the bottom of the shoe for the sole, and we'll be adhering that on to the shoe. Thanks for watching part 2 of my video, How to Make Shoes at Home. And please come back for final part of the unveiling of the shoes.
Oh, sorry.
This has been Chris of Creations by Chris. And if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and share with your family and friends.